You know how the color in your favorite pair of jeans or your go-to bath towel just seems to last forever, wash after wash? Well, making colors stick like that is actually one of the biggest challenges in the entire textile industry. It's a really fascinating process, kind of like a magic trick. So let's get into it and see how it's done. So, what does it take to lock a color into fabric so tight that it just laughs at fading from washing, sunlight, and everyday wear and tear? I mean, this is a puzzle that people have been trying to solve for centuries. It's not like painting a wall where the color just sits on top. You've got to get that color deep down inside the fibers themselves. And the answer, especially for the really tough jobs, is a special group of colorants called VAT dyes. Fun fact, they get their name from the giant wooden vats they used to be mixed in. And believe me, when it comes to durability, these things are the absolute heavyweights of the dye world. And that's not just my opinion. The source material is totally clear on this. Out of all the dyes out there, VAT dyes have the best fastness properties. Now, fastness is just the industry term for how well a color holds up. That's why they're used for stuff that takes a beating. Think work clothes, military uniforms, and those really high-quality cotton towels that last forever. Okay, but here's the twist, and it's a big one. This is what makes the whole thing so cool. In their normal, colorful state, VAT dyes are completely insoluble. They just won't dissolve in water. You can't make a dye bath with them. So how in the world do you use a dye that won't even dissolve in water to dye something? Right, so that's the big puzzle at the heart of all of this. We have the best, most durable dye you can ask for, but you can't actually use it. To figure out the solution, we first have to really understand what makes these dyes so unique. This slide pretty much lays it all out, the good and the bad. On the one hand, you get that incredible washing fastness. We're talking a 4 or 5 on a 5-point scale, which is basically as good as it gets. But on the other hand, it's a tricky, expensive process. And notice that last point, the rubbing fastness, which is how much color rubs off, isn't so great at first. Hang on to that thought, because we're going to see exactly how they fix that in a bit. And that brings us to the solution. It's this brilliant piece of chemistry called vatting. And honestly, it's basically a 3-act magic trick that happens at a molecular level. It's how they sneak the dye inside the fabric. It all boils down to these 3 simple steps. First, you hit the insoluble dye with some chemicals to make it soluble. That's step 1, getting it ready. Next, you let the fabric just soak up that now soluble dye. And then, for the grand finale, you reverse the whole process, which turns the dye back into its insoluble form, trapping it inside the fibers for good. Now, every magic trick has a secret, right? Well, the secret here is something called a leucocompound. That's just the fancy name for the temporary, water-soluble version of the dye. And here's the really wild part. In this leuco state, the dye is often totally colorless, or maybe a completely different, weird color. So the fabric goes into the dye bath and comes out looking like nothing happened. And now, for the big reveal, the final step is oxidation. Once the fabric is full of that colorless leucocompound, you just expose it to the air. The oxygen in the air triggers a chemical reaction, and poof, the dye transforms back to its original, insoluble, brilliantly colored state. The color literally blooms into existence, right there, locked inside the threads. Okay, remember how we said the rubbing fastness isn't great at first? This is how you fix it. After the color appears, there might be a few loose dye particles just hanging out on the surface. So, they give the fabric a really good wash with soap. This scrubs away all the loose stuff, leaving only the color that's permanently trapped inside. The result is a clean, crisp color that won't rub off on anything. All right, so the chemistry is incredibly cool. But how do you take this clever magic trick and do it on an industrial scale? I mean, we're talking about dyeing thousands and thousands of meters of fabric at a time. Let's take a look at the actual machines that make this all happen. In a factory, you've basically got 3 ways to go about it. First, there's batch processing. Think of it like cooking a single big pot of stew. You dye one specific amount of fabric at a time. Then you've got continuous, for the really huge jobs, where a giant, unending roll of fabric just keeps feeding through the machine. And semi-continuous is, you guessed it, kind of a mix of both. What you choose really just depends on the fabric and how much of it you're making. Now, to pull off any of these processes, you need some seriously specialized equipment. So let's dive in and look at a couple of classic machines from the batch processing world to see how they're built to handle this amazing chemical transformation. So here we've got 2 real workhorses of any dye house: the jigger on the left and the winch on the right. You can see right away they look pretty different, and that's because they're designed for totally different kinds of fabric and handle them in completely different ways. And this chart just nails the differences. A jigger machine passes the fabric back and forth completely flat under high tension. It's perfect for tough, stable woven fabrics, think canvas or denim. A winch, on the other hand, is the total opposite. It processes the fabric in a loose, flowing rope form with almost no tension, which makes it ideal for delicate knits, like the material for a t-shirt, that would get stretched out and ruined in a jigger. All right, now we're moving up to the big leagues. This is the pad steam method, and it's basically an assembly line for color. This is what you use for massive runs of fabric, where speed and efficiency are everything. Let's quickly walk through what's happening in this diagram. You can literally see our three-step magic trick happening right here in this machine. First, the fabric gets padded with the insoluble dye. Then it hits a chemical pad. That's step 1, making it soluble. It immediately zips into a steam chamber to speed up the absorption. And finally, it runs through a whole series of washing baths for rinsing, oxidation, that's the grand reveal, and the final soaping to clean it all up. But here's the thing. This entire process is incredibly sensitive. You have to be so precise. Just look at this table. Different types of VAT dyes need completely different recipes. Check out the IK, or cold dyeing group. It needs low temperatures, but a lot of salt. Now compare that to the IN, or normal group, which needs high heat and no salt at all. If you get any of these details wrong, even by a little bit, you've ruined a whole batch of fabric. It really is as much an art as it is a science. And this is exactly what happens when you don't get that precision right. Remember the poor rubbing fastness we talked about? Well, here are the usual suspects. Not enough water, leaving it in the vat too long, or, and this is a big one, not soaping it well enough at the end. Any of these mistakes can leave that loose dye on the surface, ready to rub off. It all comes back to getting the details perfect. What's so amazing is that this complex chemistry is literally all around us. That iconic blue color of denim jeans comes from indigo, which is one of the oldest and most famous VAT dyes in the world. So the next time you pull on your favorite pair of jeans and look at that classic, durable blue, maybe you'll see more than just a color. Maybe you'll see the magic trick. A dye that was made soluble, absorbed into the cotton, and then locked inside the fiber forever.